Welcome to the Global WarWatch Network and the Deep Dive. Today we're taking an in-depth look, really digging into a region often in the headlines, but frankly, rarely understood in depth. Balochistan. And this isn't just about one country. It's a vast historical land, spanning borders, packed with natural resources, but also, unfortunately, filled with deep-seated grievances and really intense conflict. We've pulled together quite a stack of sources for this one: academic journals, human rights reports, news editorials, to try and unpack the complex layers, the instability, the violence, and, crucially, the human cost here.
Yes, and what's particularly striking, I think, is that we'll be looking at Balochistan not as the single monolithic thing. We have to recognize its distinct challenges, its different dynamics in both Pakistan and Iran. The insights we've gathered really connect the dots between, say, historical policies, economic gaps, human rights issues, and they show how these factors consistently fuel the conflict and profoundly shape the lives of the below people. So the core question we're tackling today is really how these deep historical issues, these injustices, and the way resources are managed, how do they actively contribute to such prolonged instability and, frankly, widespread human suffering?
Exactly. That's the heart of it. Our mission today is to equip you with a solid, well-informed understanding of what's truly happening on the ground in this strategically vital region. We want to give you a shortcut through all the noise, the information overload, really highlighting the most important insights and maybe some surprising facts along the way. So what does this all mean? This complex reality, what does it mean for the people living there? And what are the ripple effects for broader regional security? Okay, let's start unpacking this. First off, let's set the scene, particularly in Pakistan's Balochistan province. It's often described as a land of paradoxes. What makes it so unique, so strategically important?
Well, if you look at the bigger picture, Pakistani Balochistan is geographically huge. It's the largest province by area. We're talking 43% of the country's entire territory. But, and this is the paradox, it has the smallest population, only about 5% of Pakistan's total. And it's incredibly resource rich. You've got oil, gas, minerals, plus this massive 750-mile coastline on the Indian Ocean, crucial for trade routes. Yet, despite all this wealth, it consistently ranks as one of the most, let's say, backward or underdeveloped provinces, both socioeconomically and in terms of political stability.
And digging into that political side in Pakistan, the sources really hammer home this idea of political engineering shaping Balochistan's fate since it became a province. What does that actually look like? What are we talking about?
Yeah, that term, political engineering, is key. It points to how historical actions have really laid the groundwork for the instability you see today. Successive Pakistani governments, the sources argue, have actively installed tribal heads, the Sardars, and figures described as inexperienced political figures. This created a political setup that was, and perhaps still is, quite fragile, easily manipulated by what the sources call civil, military, and political elites. And this isn't new, it dates back decades. Even after Balochistan formally became a province in 1970, you had these tribal chiefs holding significant executive and judicial powers.
Right. So if that's the political backdrop, the manipulation, the fragility, what does this mean for the average person, the ordinary Baloch people? The source mentions historical wounds of political engineering.
Well, those wounds are deep. The instability, it really stems from these historical grievances, but it's compounded by stark socioeconomic disparities, big gaps between rich and poor, lack of development, and also the persistence of ethno-nationalism. You have different ethnic and linguistic groups, Baloch, Pashtuns, Hazaras, feeling systematically shut out, excluded from mainstream politics. Central government interventions over the years, like the 1955 one-unit system, which basically dissolved existing provinces to centralize power, these moves often made things worse rather than fixing them. They consistently sparked unrest among local politicians, so Sardars, tribal leaders, and the general population. It just added fuel to the fire, really.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly and look at the specific triggers for the ongoing conflict. The sources talk about major turning points. One that comes up repeatedly is the assassination of Nawab Muhammad Akbar Khan Bugti. How significant was that event in terms of the insurgency?
Oh, hugely significant. The assassination of Nawab Akbar Bugti back in 2006, under the policies of President Pervez Musharraf at the time, that was absolutely a critical turning point. Instead of resolving anything, it did the opposite. It directly fueled what became one of the most severe insurgencies in Balochistan's history. That single event really galvanized widespread support for Baloch armed groups. It wasn't just about mourning a leader. It led directly to the creation of new organizations, like the Baloch Republican Army, the BRA.
And the grievances, it sounds like they go way beyond just political figures being targeted. What about the resources we mentioned earlier? How does the management or mismanagement of that wealth feed into the conflict?
It's another core issue. Islamabad is frequently accused, by Baloch nationalists and analysts of treating the province like a resource-rich periphery, basically prioritizing extraction, getting the gas, the minerals out for the benefit of the federal government over genuine local development for the people living there. You have these massive projects like the Sui gas fields, the Saindak and Reko Diq mines. They generate huge revenues, billions potentially. But the province itself sees very little return. Now, the 18th Amendment in 2010 was supposed to change that, give provinces more power over their resources. But the sources suggest central government interference has really limited its effectiveness, just intensifying those feelings of being marginalized, of being ripped off, essentially. That fuels discontent.
Right. So you've got this backdrop of political grievances, feeling excluded, and then this resource inequity.
Yeah.
How has the insurgency itself changed against that backdrop? What does something like Operation BAM by the BLF tell us about where they are now?
It tells us they've evolved significantly. Baloch militant groups have really intensified their attacks, and they've become more sophisticated. They're moving beyond basic guerrilla hit-and-run tactics. Operation BAM, which the BLF conducted in July 2025, according to one source, was frankly astonishing. We're talking 84 coordinated attacks over just 2 days. They targeted military forces, intelligence agencies, state infrastructure. They claimed killing 50 personnel, injuring 51, destroying vehicles, mobile towers, even shooting down surveillance drones. The BLF themselves described this as a strategic shift aimed at crippling the colonial administrative machinery. It really showcased a growing organizational strength, a capacity for complex, widespread assaults.
And it's not just the BLF pushing the envelope, is it? The Baloch Liberation Army, the BLA, they also conducted Operation Hair-Off last year. What are the key tactics we're seeing now that signal this evolution?
Exactly. It's not just one group. They're definitely moving beyond just sporadic attacks. We're seeing the use of suicide bombers now, and notably that includes women, which is a significant development. We're also seeing them temporarily seizing territory in some instances. The Jafar Express hijacking in March 2025 by a faction known as BLAJ that was incredibly bold, taking 400 passengers hostage, resulting in 26 deaths reported, is a stark example of this increasing sophistication and, frankly, ruthlessness. You now have groups like BLAJ and BLF seemingly vying for dominance, integrating specialized units. There's the Majid Brigade, that's their suicide squad, then STOS, Feta Squad for specific operations, even an intelligence wing called ZIRAB. It all points towards a clear shift to high-impact, high-profile operations.
Wow. So given this escalating threat, this evolving capability, what's been the response from Pakistan's security apparatus? And crucially, how effective has it been?
While the numbers paint a worrying picture, the Pakistan Institute for Peace Studies reported a 70% jump in Baloch insurgent attacks in 2025 compared to the year before. Attacks on key highways are becoming common, disrupting transport and commerce. The state's response, it's often described as heavy-handed. Military offensives, yes, but also allegations of widespread forced disappearances, extrajudicial killings. Paradoxically, this approach seems to have strengthened the insurgents' resolve, according to some analyses. It's even unified previously disparate Baloch factions against a common enemy. Fatalities rose significantly in 2024, hitting 322, partly because the insurgents started using suicide attacks more frequently. There's a very clear and very dangerous cycle of violence, political mobilization, and repression playing out. It just seems to deepen the crisis with every turn.
Okay, let's pivot now across the border to Iranian Balochistan. It shares that common Baloch identity, obviously, but it faces some different dynamics, especially when it comes to human rights. The Balochistan Human Rights Group, BHRG, their annual report for 2024 paints a really grim picture. What's the core issue they're highlighting over there?
Yeah, the situation in Iran's Sistan and Balochistan province, while sharing the Baloch ethnicity, has its own set of severe problems. The core issue highlighted in that BHRG report is this stark contrast between Iran's constitutional principles, which on paper guarantee equal rights regardless of ethnicity or religion, and the reality on the ground. The report documents frequent systemic violations, things like Baloch children being routinely denied education in their own mother tongue. Many kids apparently lack birth certificates because security agencies create obstacles. Sistan and Balochistan province, which is majority Baloch, is consistently ranked among the most underprivileged in Iran. And the report alleges this isn't accidental. It points to a deliberate policy of, quote, imposing poverty and exerting pressure specifically to suppress the Baloch people and maintain tight control over the region's resources.
That raises serious questions about the legal system itself. The report details a shocking number of executions involving Balak prisoners. Can you give us a sense of the scale here? It sounds disproportionate.
It is alarmingly disproportionate. Balak individuals make up about 5% of Iran's total population, right? But they account for nearly 30% of all executions recorded in the country. That's a huge overrepresentation. In 2024 alone, the report documents at least 111 Balak prisoners executed across 23 cities. And get this, a staggering 75% of those executions were for drug-related offenses. The report highlights a deeply disturbing pattern: lack of fair trials, confessions allegedly obtained under torture, denial of access to independent lawyers. There are specific documented cases mentioned, like Amir Hamza Barhoui Mojarrad, where a sentence was apparently overturned due to lack of evidence but then just reinstated, or even more chilling, cases where security agencies allegedly offered prisoners release if they agreed to assassinate opposition figures, as tragically reported in the case of Mohammed Karim Barakzai Aksan.
That's horrific. Just horrific. And it's not only executions. The report talks about unregulated shootings by security forces being widespread. How bad is this problem in the Balak majority areas of Iran?
It's presented as a very serious and widespread problem. The law in Iran supposedly has strict conditions for when security forces can use firearms. But the reality, according to the report, is that military and security forces operating in Balochistan seem to enjoy a kind of unwritten immunity. They act with impunity. In 2024, the documented reports collected by BHRG show 208 Balak citizens were killed or injured just from direct shootings by these forces. This includes incidents during home raids, sometimes involving RPGs or grenades, apparently car chases, and even landmine explosions near populated areas. Out of those 208 casualties, 115 died. 93 were injured. And tragically, this included 13 children and 4 women killed, and 20 children and 12 women wounded. The report notes this is a significant increase from 2023, especially the number of injuries, which were up over 130%. It indicates a worsening pattern of violence.
The report also brings up this phenomenon of armed unknown individuals carrying out attacks. It suggests there's more going on than just standard tribal conflicts. What's the allegation there?
Right, that's another disturbing finding. While these attacks are often officially blamed on tribal conflicts or personal vendettas, the BHRG report explicitly alleges something more sinister. It claims that state security agencies, particularly the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the Ministry of Intelligence, play a significant role, sometimes even a direct one, in this violence. They're accused of irresponsibly arming individuals who often have criminal backgrounds, essentially fostering an environment where gun violence thrives. The numbers for 2024 are stark. 469 Balak citizens attacked by these unknown individuals, resulting in 284 deaths and 185 injuries. Again, children and women are among the victims. And crucially, the report mentions at least one documented case where police officers were later identified as the actual perpetrators in a killing initially blamed on these unknowns. It suggests a deliberate obfuscation, possibly state complicity.
This paints a picture of deep insecurity alongside extreme poverty. And that poverty seems central, forcing people into incredibly dangerous work, like being fuel carriers or sootbari, as it's known locally. What exactly does that involve? It sounds desperate.
It is desperate, and it's a direct consequence, the report argues, of the systemic lack of sustainable, safe employment options in Iranian Balochistan. So, people turn to being fuel carriers. They transport diesel and gasoline, often in highly unsafe containers like plastic jugs, strapped to motorbikes or old pickups. They travel on remote, often unpaved, dangerous roads, risking terrible accidents, fires, robberies, even natural disasters like flash floods. But the single biggest threat they face, according to the report, comes from the security forces themselves. These forces tend to treat fuel carriers not as citizens trying to survive extreme poverty, but simply as criminals. The report documents frequent instances where forces open fire directly, often without any warning. This led to a staggering 479 casualties among fuel carriers in 2024 alone, 253 deaths, 226 injuries. There was a government program, the Razak program, meant to provide some legal income channel for this, but the report says it's largely failed due to corruption and inefficiency. It hasn't solved the underlying problem.
So the risks are enormous. What happens to the families when a fuel carrier, often the main provider, is killed or injured?
The consequences are devastating, as you'd expect. The death or serious injury of a fuel carrier, who is often the family's primary, if not sole, breadwinner, just plunges them into immediate economic crisis. But it's not just economic. There's profound psychological trauma, too. And the cycle continues. Children are frequently forced to drop out of school to try and support the family, maybe even becoming fuel carriers themselves eventually. It just perpetuates the cycle of poverty, danger, and hardship across generations.
Beyond the immediate violence and economic hardship, the report points to larger government-driven policies that seem to systematically target the Baloch identity and their land. Can you tell us about this Meghwan Coast Development Plan?
Yes, this raises a really important question about how development projects, which sound positive on the surface, can actually be used as tools for displacement and, some argue, cultural erasure. The Makran Coast Development Plan, also referred to ominously as the seizure of Balochistan's coastline, is a massive state project. The stated aim is to settle 2.5 million non-Baloch people along the 675-kilometer coastline of Sistan and Balochistan province. This is widely viewed by Baloch groups and human rights organizations as a blatant violation of indigenous rights. They argue it directly threatens Baloch culture, their language, their national identity, by deliberately changing the demographics of the region. It also tends to exacerbate economic inequality, as jobs and opportunities created by these projects often favor the incoming non-Baloch population over the local Baloch. And happening alongside this, there's also a proposal to divide the Sistan and Balochistan province itself, which is similarly seen as a strategy to dilute Baloch identity and weaken their collective political power.
And how does this translate on the ground? Are people losing their homes, their land?
Yes, absolutely. Connecting this to the bigger picture, the report details how military-linked or government-affiliated foundations, it names the Mahan Company as one example, have seized thousands of hectares of ancestral Baloch land. This is often done under vague pretexts like declaring the land national lands or clearing it for large-scale agricultural projects like banana plantations or building infrastructure like desalination plants. These projects also often redirect scarce water resources away from traditional local farmers, further undermining their livelihoods. And then there's direct destruction. In 2024 alone, the report documented at least 36 cases where homes belonging to Baloch citizens and even Sunni places of worship, remember, most Baloch are Sunni Muslim and Shia-majority Iran, were destroyed. This represents a huge jump, over 71% increase from 2023. It's happening in cities like Zahedan and Chabahar, and often these demolitions happen without proper judicial warrants and are frequently accompanied by reports of assault against the homeowners trying to resist.
Finally, the report touches on conditions inside prisons for Baloch inmates and the general treatment of activists. What are the key takeaways there? It sounds like a continuation of these violations.
It really does. The breadth of violations reported is quite striking. Inside prisons, Baloch inmates reportedly face severe overcrowding, unsanitary conditions, terrible filth, lack of proper ventilation, and systemic medical negligence. This neglect tragically leads to deaths in custody. In 2024, the report documents 6 Baloch prisoners dying in just 2 prisons, Zahedan and Zabul. One death was explicitly attributed to severe torture. Beyond the prisons, ordinary Baloch citizens and activists face harassment. Things like illegal summonses, just getting a phone call demanding they report somewhere without any official warrant. Arrests are often carried out violently, again, without informing people of the charges against them. For 2024, BHRG documented 38 such summonses and 364 arrests, including women and even children. And in a particularly alarming trend, some Baloch detainees who lack Iranian identification papers have reportedly been forcibly deported to Afghanistan. Once there, they face a whole new crisis and risk being shot by Iranian border guards if they try to return to their homeland.
And just briefly, what about basic worker safety for those who aren't fuel carriers and the well-being of children in Iranian Balochistan generally?
The lack of decent, sustainable jobs forces many Baloch workers to migrate to other Iranian provinces seeking work. But once there, they often face exploitation, extremely unsafe working conditions, and lack basic rights like insurance coverage. In 2024, the report documented 62 Baloch workers killed or injured in things like workplace accidents, road accidents traveling to or from work, fires, even gas poisoning in substandard accommodation. For children, the situation is heartbreakingly dire. 42 Baloch children, from infants up to teenagers, died in 2024. The causes listed include medical negligence, a lack of specialist doctors in the province, preventable accidents, and tragically, even suicide among young people. And one shocking statistic really stands out. 90 people, including 54 children, drowned in 2024. This is attributed to a desperate lack of safe recreational facilities like swimming pools and essential infrastructure, like safe bridges over rivers or irrigation channels, forcing people into dangerous situations just to cool off or cross water.
So putting this all together, looking at both Pakistan and Iran, what does this all mean for the future of Balochistan? It's a region grappling with such deep historical grievances, severe economic exploitation, and this relentless cycle of violence fueled by complex state policies and this evolving insurgency.
Yeah, when you connect all these threads, the picture that emerges from our sources is pretty clear. Sustainable peace in Balochistan, whether in Pakistan or Iran, seems to require a really fundamental shift in approach, a shift away from repression, away from heavy-handed security responses, and towards genuine reconciliation. That means seriously addressing the widespread human rights abuses we've discussed, fostering authentic political dialogue where Baloch voices are actually heard, and pursuing genuinely inclusive development that benefits the local population. It's fundamentally about recognizing and acknowledging those deep historical wounds, those systemic issues, rather than just reacting with force every time there's an incident.
Which brings us back to that core question, doesn't it? Can these long-standing grievances of the Baloch people, grievances that span both Pakistan and Iran, ever truly be addressed without a comprehensive, human-centered approach? An approach that really prioritizes justice, human rights, and equitable resource distribution. Feels like a monumental challenge.
It absolutely is. And what's fascinating, I think, from this deep dive is seeing just how deeply intertwined all these issues are. You can't separate the political marginalization from the fight over resources. You can't separate the human rights violations from the rise in militant activity. They all feed each other. Understanding that dynamic, that complex interplay, is absolutely crucial if you want to see beyond the often simplistic headlines and appreciate the very difficult, very complex reality on the ground for millions of people.
The truly sobering deep dive today into a region that definitely demands more of our attention. What stands out most to you after hearing all this? We really encourage you, our listeners, to reflect on this multifaceted nature of conflict and human rights in Balochistan. Think about the implications, not just for the people there, but for regional stability and for the broader global conversation we're having about ethnic minorities, self-determination, and justice. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive on the Global WarWatch Network. If you found this discussion insightful, and we hope you did, please do like, share, and subscribe to the Global WarWatch Network. We'd also genuinely love to hear your thoughts on this complex issue, so please leave your comments in the section below. Until next time.